I mean, this is one of the few. This is one of the few times I get to speak and engage as an academic for quite a number of reasons. There's an Italian man called Antonio Gramsci. So Gramsci was battling with this question of the intellectual. Who are and what is the intellectual? And he came to a conclusion that there are two types of intellectuals. They are the traditional intellectuals who teach the students about the theory and the issues, and then they go home. They wait for their salaries. They are usually very neat. They wear suits, and they are invited by journalists to make commentary on issues. They would, for instance, teach students about democracy and the importance of protest action, and they will never protest. Those are the traditional intellectuals. But it's also lucrative to be a traditional intellectual because you are neat, you didn't get involved in funny things. Everybody celebrates you and contacted for comment. Dr. Amupanda, that's why you never find me contacted for comment. Those are the type of intellectual, but there are also other types of intellectual. They are called organic intellectuals. Now, the organic intellectuals don't just interpret events. They actually go out and make things happen. I remember at one time during our activism, we went to, when we went to Kleine Coupe, we were with my colleague, Mr. Chitende. Most people actually don't realize, but fortunately for him, when the media came, he was wearing a t-shirt wearing People FC. So he was facing on the other side. So they never actually saw that Mr. Chitende was there. So Chitende and others, organic intellectuals, struggled at that place called the University of Namibia. Now, this is the only time I get to speak as an organic intellectual because I'm dealing with an academic subject matter. I identify as an organic intellectual because I don't think I will ever rest to just simply speak about the theory and never go out there and have things happen. That's why John and others in the law faculty will always argue and say, but how do you teach administrative law and you are subjected to illegal and unprocedural things? So you teach your students what? This is admin law, this is how it's supposed to be, this is Article 18, but you are the very same victim of Article 18 in the institution that you work for. So that's part of the challenges that we find ourselves in. So finding a balance. I don't believe that we must just be purely organic intellectuals, because being an organic intellectual also becomes very problematic because people forget that you have qualification. People forget that you study because you are always in these muddy activities. Say, for example, you are an agricultural economist, you are always counting cows in some forest there. People might be confuse you with a farm worker. If you are a political scientist and you find yourself in the street now and then, they might conclude that you are just like any other politician. They will forget. That's also the risk that you also find. It is the same risk that you would find as a traditional intellectual, because what is the purpose of just being able to tell people what is wrong and being able to do nothing about it? So I think for our context and for Namibia, we need to be able to find a balance, because if we don't find a balance, it's going to be very problematic. And it's that aspect of balance that takes me now to this book. There is no straight line. For example, this book is published outside Namibia. Yeah? It's published in Switzerland, Basler Africa Bibliographien. Yeah? Is that how we... Those are the guys that published. If you are interested in self-actualization, you will pride yourself that I'm an internationally published author, because your book is found in those places, in those libraries. But it's also a shame that we have to go to Switzerland to publish our own books. You see the balance now. But because this book was published outside Namibia and is found in that library, the university at Basel, But if it was published here, it wouldn't be even make it in the universities in South Africa. Again, it's a balance that you need to be able to make and continue to understand that they are not straight lines. Yeah, so it's a delicate balance that we would need to do. Henry firstly asked, as a tradition of I'm not here because I'm involved in radical books, but I'm here to have this conversation about the book. And this book has not been launched because I was thinking, this is the purpose of launching a book anyway. And there is no preface. You see, you find some books, people really want to have some minister or prime minister or some other people to justify, to give credence to their work. And then there will be a preface, and then there will be a quote of some famous person, Ellison Chirera. This is the best book of 21st century. And sometimes you find on the cover of those books actually lies, but it's what it is. I'm really here to talk about the importance of writing. I think all I could say is that without starting, you never finish. You can get many advices. Whatever it is that you do, if you don't start, you never experience. If you don't experience, you never learn. If you don't learn, you never finish. That's just how it is. So I'm not going to advise you to say this is the best way, this is how you do it. But all I can advise you is just that you must start. Because if you don't start, then the conversation will not get anywhere. Of course, it's not going to be an easy thing, but it's also easy. And Henry failed in one thing, that he's supposed to have spread the bookshop further to publishing, actually. I don't know why he didn't do that. He will probably blame COVID. He will speak when he gets a chance to. But those are the aspects that we need to be able. There are problems, but the biggest problem is the inability for somebody to start, for an author to start writing. Yeah, because the history books don't remember who was the richest person in Namibia, who drive the nicest car in the year 2000. Do you remember with nice shoes at the university when you were studying there? You don't even remember what you were wearing on your 21st birthday if there are no photos. Such is the nature of history. It doesn't remember, you dwindle in insignificance. There's these songs and the fame and all those things, we have nothing to. I think the best legacy to leave is something that even your children will be able to say, my father wrote a book. Yeah? Even just try about your experiences. People speak about their poverty and as if poverty will never return, as if they've achieved. But write whatever it is that you want to write. That is the specific aspect that I think, in the interest of time, I don't really want to speak a lot because you have to, once you get a book, it is important for you to engage certain subject. But I just want to give you a specific context. The dynamics of book writing and my experiences also with this book. But also at the time of the research that I was doing. And you would see that the book deals with matters that people are not comfortable discussing. Yeah, it takes a decolonial approach because, for example, some people actually argue, are you justifying criminal activities? So because clearly these guys stole the diamonds, are you justifying criminal activities? And my answer is that it's focusing on colonial Namibia. Was the government legitimate? So if I come to your mother's house and I establish myself in your mother's bedroom, and you get it, and then I maybe come with some beers there, and I say you must still stay there, but just sleep in the kitchen. You make your way to the bedroom and you take the beer, and you go and sell it by the neighbor, and you make some money out of that. Are you a thief? So the question of moral cosmopolitanism. So I also had a fight during my research with my supervisors because one of the supervisors is my old friend. He couldn't be here, Professor Andre Dupisani and Professor Plau. And at one point I just decided, man, I'm going to abandon this thing. So that day I decided because now that's the consequences of organic intellectualism. So I wanted to bring the street into there. So I came, I parked my car, and I was speaking to Rui, and this man, fed up with these guys, man, I can't. Because they were arguing that they were scared of being sued. My supervisor was actually saying they were scared of being sued if the names are kept like that. So I said, stuff this thing. I'm just going to publish my book. I'm not going to continue. Because remember, the book is also taken from the material as part of my research of my PhD. It was only Mr. Shitende who said, hey, man, just... Because deep down I said, this guy is my friend, he's trying to sell me out. He's not listening to what I'm trying to say. No, just try it one more, man. Try it one more. And lo and behold, we managed to finish. So it's not going to be an easy process. One day I traveled to Onesi to collect data because there was this man now who used to deal in diamonds. So we came, we sat at his bar. But I mean, I had to have respondents from every constituency. So this man, we sat down and he started now telling me the story. In the middle of the story, the sun just comes. No, I know this guy. This is a politics guy. But because the son could not understand that you are a political scientist doing research, I said, he stopped the discussion. Now imagine you travel all the way to Onesi. Yeah? And I had to find another respondent. So obviously it's not also going to be easy. So down through the process, I also discovered that I was very confident. Now, we tell our children, and that's also an aspect that you find in the book. We tell our children that work hard, build your businesses. And part of the discussion in this book, you are going to discover that it speaks about diamond princess. Yeah? Is a term that I coined to describe all those prominent businesses who are credited for being hard workers. I'm not saying they're not hard workers, but I'm just saying I was able to trace and actually discover that the basis of their businesses, which I'm proud of, is diamond. And there is this law, a crazy law that was written. It's called Prevention of Organized Crime Act, the POCA. You will find it on what part of the book? For those of you, when you eventually get a copy of the book, you will find POCA challenge. The challenge that I had with POCA during my study and the collection of the evidence, somewhere on page okay, you will find it whatever the page is. So what is actually saying? This law says nothing in this act would, in other words, they can actually, maybe the lawyers can interpret things. I found it very strange. It actually had an impact on research. On one hand, we have academic freedom guaranteed in the Constitution, that we have freedom to inquire, freedom to publish our findings, but POCA says nothing in the act. If it's so discovered that you have proceeds from illegal activities, even before the commencement of that act. The lawyers tell us that law is supposed to be, it's not supposed to be retrospective, isn't it? But POCA says that they can even go back to 1990, even I think they can even go to 1975. Because they say that any law that was applicable before Namibia's independence, until and unless it's repealed, it becomes applicable. So if there is a law that criminalizes stealing of diamond, which other people can probably argue is that it's a common law practice, it's still applicable. So part of the challenge that I have is that you now needed to protect almost everybody that you interview, except for key informants that are interviewed on the basis of their skills. One of the things that John and others perhaps should be able to take place. So those are all the challenges that you also find. But it was also very exciting. Now, during those processes, because nobody speak about diamonds and their contribution, people were basking in shame. But immediately when the arguments that are advanced in this book, you can see that those that dealt in diamond smuggling, then some of them that's old men, they still call me and say, hey, my boy, we are proud of you. Because we were able to put an account together that we had no responsibility of legitimizing an illegal and illegitimate regime. So when the local people were helping themselves to their own resources of their ancestors, they did nothing wrong in the colonial context. So that's one of the arguments that we're also arguing, that can you claim that something illegal has happened during the colonial project? It was legal to kill a black person during the colonial project. But why is it that those people were able to help themselves to the diamonds and they went to build churches in their communities? We stigmatize them. That's also one of the conclusions, and it's been done. It's an argument that is done beautifully in a scientific way. Because the apartheid state was declared. Apartheid was declared as crime against humanity. How is it that an illegality can be found when the United Nations and everybody else found that the regime was illegitimate? The ICJ went to rule, I think it's in 1974 or 1976, about the presence of South Africa in Namibia. How is it that the local people, whatever it is that they did, would be regarded as illegal? So we contest that narrative with clear conclusion to argue using Sen's definition of development. What is it that can account as development? Is it a huge building? So Sen, the book, assume and take Sen's, the Indian scholar, development as freedom, development as opportunity. Okay? So I'm just explaining to you the intricacy and the challenges to answer and respond to Henry's question about the challenges that the author you will find. You will see all these things, but it's also very exciting. By the time I did much part of collection of my data when I went to Orania, it was 2017. You still couldn't get into Orania without a permit in your own country. 2017, that means what? Is it 27 years after independence? You still couldn't get in without a permit. Somebody inside must apply for you to come. It's not only that you need a permit, but you also need to demonstrate and show to NAMDEP, to your government, where are you going to stay in our sacred place called Orania. But there was still no road. The road they were just completing it. But in the 1950s, 1960s, they built a road. CDM built a road over the Orange River to be able to transport the diamonds. In the 50s, 27 years after independence, no road built. But it wasn't necessary to see. And you would understand when you read the book, there's a part where we speak about CDM. CDM stands for Consolidated Diamond Mine, which is now NAMDEP. CDM was effectively a state within a state. It had some sort of relative autonomy. Now, I just quickly want to do the connection between why are we arguing and saying illegal diamond and connecting it to Owambo and connecting it to development. Yeah? And you need to be able to understand. And you see, you just hear Vambu, Dr. Benzi is here. This, who is this? I'm a Vambu. What do you speak? I speak Vambu. Where I'm from? I'm from Vambu. And that's generally, it has even penetrated into literature. I even had a discussion. The language is not Vambu. The language is Oshiwambo. Ne? But remember, the Boer doesn't have, to a Boer, the W is V. So Oshiwambo, so what the Boer did, remove the O and S and I, removed that, changed the W to V, the language becomes Vambo. So the person is Omwambo. The person is not a Vambo. Omwambo. The place is Owambo. Ne? Oshiwambo. Omuwambo. Owambo. So I'm just raising this issue so that you can understand that when you read, you will find some parts that say Vambo. There's no such a thing. It's a W that is made a V. And most people will not understand that. Probably it's the same as when we say you speak Damara when we meant Koikoikoa, probably. He said Damara, he speaks from Damara, but at least we don't have to say, oh, he's going to Damara. At least we still say Damara land. So I just want to deal with that connection. How do we then respond? What is a connection? How does a mine such as CDM and a town such as Orania, you just draw conclusion and you speak about Owambo? How do we explain that? And there's many historical explanation that you need to understand, one of which is a contract labor system. But even before the contract labor system started, how do I explain? The contract labor, I realize there are also my students here. The contract labor system is a system where black workers were brought into the police zone, the area marked as an area for white settlement during a colonial period, taken from those native communities to come and work. But the Awambos were already, during German colonialism in the 1800s, most of them were already in these areas. I think by 1910, the evidence you see in the book, by 1910, there were already about 8,000 of them working as indentured labor. It means people who are working in the police zone in all these areas without you are not employed. There's no contract. You're just working there. So already at that time, that's what was happening. Now, in 1925, the colonial state was concerned about what is it that we need to do, because they needed to supply labor to the mines and the farms and things like that. Because remember, during when the South African took over, you are a young man, you are 25, you get free money from what now becomes an agri-bank, you get free slaves to work for you in those farms. They established two labor recruitment organizations. The first one is called Northern Labor Recruitment Organization, called NLO. The other one called SLO, Southern Labor Recruitment Organization. So the purpose of these two institutions was to recruit labor to go work in mines and farms of white people. SLO was recruiting for workers to go and work in mines in southern Namibia. But remember already, when we are talking about 1925, between 1904 and 1908, the population in central and southern part has been not completely, rightly decimated through the genocide. So the colonial state now needed to justify, they needed labor, because they've killed a lot of people through genocide. So they need now to supply that. So they went to establish this institution to make up for the labor. So the SLO had an office in Ondangwa. NLO had an office in Rundu. So they wanted to get the Awambo and Kavango labor to make up for the labors in the south. So in Rundu with NLO, those that are recruited, they would work in northern farms such as TLC, is it TLC or TCL? The Tsumeb. Yeah, the mine in Tsumeb and farms. SLO with an office in Ondangwa was recruiting for the southern farms and mines. So that's the context in which, so in other words, the Awambos were already being recruited in Ondangwa through a colonial institution that transported them from there to Grootfontein and eventually to Orania and other places that they would find. So in 1943, there was that. Some people, once a person is not recruited here, you're supposed to be a Kavango in order to be recruited to go and work there. So some Awambos were walking on foot all the way to Rundu to be recruited by NLO when they miss. There's a rigorous process that you undergo through that process, because you have to undress yourself. They have to check your penis, move it back and forward to see whether there is syphilis or gonorrhea. They have to kneel back. This young white boy would insert his finger in the anus of a man who probably 40. And imagine if you go there with your father, and this young boy is busy operating on your father, like that. So sometimes you don't succeed, and if you don't succeed, they go to Rundu. Yeah. So when they go to Rundu to be recruited, so the contest began to say there are some encroachments. So the people started really fighting one another. But down the process also emerges what is called Wenela. Wenela stands for, you hear people in Zambezi talking about Wenela border post. Wenela stands for Wetsvatestrand Native Labourers Association. So it entered and started recruiting individuals and people to go and work in the mines, in gold mines in Johannesburg. And Wenela was giving a better offer compared to other, to SLO and NLO. So because of that problem, in 1943, NLO and SLO were amalgamated and put together, and they established what is called Southwest African Native Labour Association, SWANLA. Now SWANLA was then recruiting all those people. So that is why. So if SLO is recruiting in Ondangwa and all the people that are there in that area, that is why you would always see from the you see some, the book reproduces some columns for you to understand that, and you find on page 6, from 1924 to 1959, the Awambo always constituted more than 90% of contract laborers in the whole country. Except the year 1941, when they had 86% because of that recruitment. So preliminary, the book now deals with those. How is it possible, and how did it emerge that in Orania, say for example in 1985, everyone that the majority, 99% of the employees that are there are just Awambo, for instance. And you would see on page 7, you find a sign of the Spergebit. Spergebit means a forbidden area. How do I explain the Spergebit? Well, there was always the Germans. They tell you this story about Zakaria Lewala from Lutritz, that is the first one to discover a diamond. The first diamond was found in 1908. It's actually not correct. The first diamonds were found in the 1800s. I think it's 1891 or so. Around Berseba, two diamonds actually. One is Berseba, one in the area of Gibeon. But it wasn't as famous as the one that was discovered in Lutritz by Zakaria Lewala. And it then became very, very prominent. Lewala, you remember that when he discovered that diamond, he gave it to August Stouch, the boss. And the Germans were already, I think, during the German colonialism, they had extracted 55 million carats of diamonds already during that period. So after the August Stouch found that first diamond, the so-called first diamond, the Secretary of Colonial Settlements, Dr. Bernard Den, you find the name this, Denberg or something, yes, Denberg, came to then German Southwest Africa to actually, what is this diamond that has been discovered? Stouch was already getting a lot of diamond, and he put a diamond in an envelope and he sent it to his wife in Germany. In fact, when Denberg came, Stauch gave Dannenberg 20 diamonds to go and give to the Kaiser in Germany at the time. So what does it mean? Is that they were always, diamond activity was always taking place instead of this narrative that has been made. Immediately after that discovery, we now experience what is called the diamond rush. Okay? Then the colonial government then established an area and declared it the Sperrgebied, the forbidden area, measuring around 26,000 square kilometers. I think that area, the Sperrgebied, must have been maybe 300 kilometers and 100 kilometers. So that area, so the Sperrgebied, already by then it was a forbidden area. And when you see on page 7, there is that sign as you enter the Sperrgebied, and that warning sign only have 4 languages. Is the English, that trespassers will be prosecuted, is the Afrikaans, is German, and Oshiwambo. It is not necessary. The book also goes in details to deal with this question of the first diamond. Who discovered the first diamond? What is the first diamond? The first diamond, maybe in Beersheba, if we go there and we start digging, we might actually find more diamond. Or where did the diamond come from? Zakari would probably help us to go and dig there to find more diamond in Gibeon and Beersheba. But that's what historical facts are indicating. So during then that period, remember South Africans take over in 1915. Yeah? The guys, the Oppenheimer family, people will just speak of Oppenheimer. The first guy was this Ernest Oppenheimer. He gets to Namibia during that period in 1914. Now the following year, the Union of South Africa takes over. Louis Botha and others take over, and Oppenheimer already start negotiating. Start negotiating in terms of what is it that supposed to happen. And he was negotiating with what is called, these guys from Lutheris Rhythm call themselves Lutheris Buch. Lutheris Buchter. Now, the original Lutheris Buchter is actually a group. It's called Lutheris Buchter Producers. It's that group of August Tauch and others. The names are there in the books. That group that control that interest. So Ernest Oppenheimer start negotiating and engaging with the Lutheris Buchter, and they start agreeing now with the colonial government. They will go to South Africa between 1915 and 1918. They'll start negotiating for the new agreement on what is it that is supposed to happen. And you can see already how the book goes in details, how the Oppenheimer family has been very crafty. I think Ernest would die in 1959 or so. His son Harry takes over from that period. I think Harry would die in 1998 or so, and then the son took over 2 years. This one, what is his name now? The current one? John?
No.
Who's the chairman now of the BS? Okay, you will eventually get the name. Is it Nico? Nicky Oppenheimer then takes over during that period. So the point is that is usually not made, and the book argues that point, is that how crafty the Oppenheimer family has always been from the beginning. So you see already in 1920, all diamond licenses would be cancelled. Now during that period, the Oppenheimer had a company called Anglo-American. Okay? Through the process, they would eventually establish the Consolidated diamond mines. And Oppenheimer was not originally part of the BS. He later became a chairman of the BS later when his company Anglo-American acquires the majority shares, and the story continues like that. So I'm now trying to explain to you how does this. So you had a colonial machinery that was already organized to supply labor to these guys, and then the BS would come in already 1915, consolidate and conclude agreement in terms of what is it they're supposed to do. The book also go in detail so that you can understand that the BS is actually not a joke. It's not a joke. They are very organized, and the book actually argues, and you see that the guys would smuggle the diamonds and they will sell it in the black market. There is some evidence in the literature also that the BS also goes find a way to buy those diamonds also. It appears a contentious issue to some people, but generally that's what you find. Very interesting stories there in Botswana, for example. A colleague of mine, Professor Lieben Greenberg, is no longer with us. He wanted to publish a book with Unam Press. It has this. The book had this part about, is it Mohai? Yeah, I think it's Mohai, former president of Botswana. So the BS was organizing him to have a good time, and he was having sex with girls there at some offices. So they were entertaining this guy. So Greenberg wanted to publish this book. Unam Press didn't publish the book. I don't know whether they were called or they were told, but he went to publish it elsewhere. So it's a scientific fact in terms of those stories. And one of the guys who went to spill the beans is a man called Chindo. And he went to die mysteriously in Botswana. You will find those details in the book. But Henry is looking at me and he's saying I'm talking a lot. Am I not? So I'm just giving you that historical context that it is important for you to actually understand where is the connection. So the contract labor system, the colonial state, and these guys, the CDM that consolidate a partnership, are then able to have that thread. But specifically, the context and the context of the book speaks about these mine workers. What did it that they start doing? And it's amazing because most of these guys, they didn't come there with qualification. They didn't come there with degrees. Okay, they didn't come there with degrees. How is it possible that they were able to go through a system designed by engineers and to be able to smuggle diamonds? And when we are talking about smuggling diamonds, we're not talking about a small issue. The reports from the BS and CDM itself about, they call it leakages. Yeah? So the leakages is what accounts for what has been losing through this process. They are saying it's anything between 10 to 20% of the production. So whatever the production is, deduct 10 to 20% that accounts for that. And in monetary terms, this is anything between 80 million to 150 million. So if you want to understand the scale, the context of this illegal diamond industry, that's how, by confirmation of the BS itself, I don't know how they found out, but this is what is available there when you go to those specific records. How do these uneducated, illiterate or semi-illiterate colleagues manage to smuggle diamonds? How were they doing it? And the book goes in details. We found many methods when we were interviewing them. We found many methods, probably more than 40 ways of smuggling diamonds. And I consolidated them into 10. And some of those issues are quite very interesting stories. When I was doing research, I was actually laughing how they were able to outmaneuver. Now, because remember during that period is that there were no women allowed in Orania. If I'm not mistaken, there's a story that some of the men are, I think First Lady, parents in that generation might have been the first one to come. So just men that were there. So all these employees that are there, I hope you got the book, eh? So there were no women. You don't go there with your wife. Remember, these contract laborers will stay there for 18 months. That means what? 1 year, 8 months. They are not there at home. So to cancel and for the psychosocial support of the employees, CDM actually had an agreement with the church. I'm not sure. I think it must have been an Elsin church or so. So these preachers, the compound where the employees used to sleep was actually inside the mine itself. So they will then come now and then to preach on Sunday. So for them they have to clear what is called checkpoint to go in there. And then they will come and conduct either church services. And these employees will then go and attend that church services. So one of the stories, they are saying that they agreed with some of the pastors that were there. So took the Bible like this, and you see the Bible is thick, and you cut a hole in there, and they put the diamonds in the Bible. So the pastor would pass through the checkpoint. I mean, who searches the men of God? So then they would use the Bible to smuggle out of that. I think with the passage coming towards independence, they would also bring in the bankers, people for them to bank, the guys from the bank. So, I mean, there's a container of money, and then the diamonds would also go in there. Some of them bought they brought the doves. It's a common story. The doves, you come and you prepare a proper jacket. You know the doves, you train them, they fly, they come back home, isn't it? So they go with the doves in their pockets, load the diamonds, the dove will fly back to the destination, and then you just come and take the diamonds. But as you know, our people, somebody hears about it, one person becomes so greedy. So the jacket is a technical thing that you need to do. So the jacket must be careful, and you don't put too much. Maybe some guys must have been from Olukonda or George Village. So these guys started loading more diamonds. So when they loaded more diamonds, so the dove couldn't fly anymore. So it flew there. Then the security guys picked it up. Then after that, the doves are no longer allowed. They are just killed whenever they are seen. But those guys were also very innovative. They would take bows and arrows. You take an arrow, you put sufficient diamonds there, and you shoot on the other side of the fence. So your friends are just there now waiting to. And some of them really just take risk. Some of them really just take risk because the X-ray machines are, because of, is it radioactive or what is it called? It's not, sometimes it's on randomly, it's not like every day. Because if you subject a person every time, so they just take chances, some of them. Some of them collaborate with security officials. They just pretend that they don't see anything. There was actually a very interesting story of a man who had one eye. And you see in the book there's a Portuguese connection. So when they went to sell their diamonds with the Portuguese said, "Oh, what type of eye that you had?" It's an artificial one. So the Portuguese took it out. They went to reconfigure it, and they make it to be a parcel in there. So the guy, but he got a lot of diamonds through that. And the other one had a broken arm. So they will load the diamonds, just artificial limb. When they pass through they are unable to detect. And some of them just swallow the diamonds. You go back, you swallow. When you go on the other side, you shit, and then you quickly sort it out. But in conclusion, what was actually happening, so it's a whole big, the book speaks about Oshero native diamond smuggling syndicate. It's a term that I used to employ. So there's this, when you are interviewing everyone, they're just saying, no, there's a person with Oshero. Oshero means a gate. What it means, all of us are here, but it's only one person who has a way knowing how to pass through there with a diamond. So what actually happened, you take your diamond and you give it to this one, and you give it to another one, and you give it to another one. And that other person, if it's Nambili, is the only one that has a way to pass it through there. So when Nambili passes through, our diamond goes through, and he brings back the money, and it goes to another person until it comes now to you. But sometimes the guy say, no, the diamonds are lost. Now, if the diamonds are lost, but you see the guy also driving a Mercedes Benz. So it created a lot of problems, and most of them really started apparently approaching Ochimbingwe there. Some people who just have funny car accidents. In fact, when you go to Owamboland now, there are actually houses that were bought with diamond money, and those houses, no one goes in there until now. Towards the conclusion of the book, there is a particular earth in Oshakati. And this house has been like that. I schooled there. It has been like that. So when I'm doing my collection, I asked the town council, is this house in good standing with the municipality? It doesn't, there's no rated taxes, it's just standing there. It owes. They ought to have auctioned it. But they never auctioned it, and they won't auction it. If we had a white person as the CEO of Oshakati Town Council, so when I asked them why, and they said, no, we don't talk about those things. Nobody touches those things. And you could see that clearly when they use the diamond rents and the returns. In one village, if you have 5 hectares of your Mahangu field, and you would cultivate it with donkeys, it will probably take you a week or 2 to do that cultivation. In those communities, remember the Bantu education, and if you are not allowed to be an engineer, you are not allowed to be a lawyer, you are not allowed to be anything. You are either a nurse or a pastor or maybe those connected teacher that connects. Those teachers that didn't necessarily just sub 2 or not even BTT. We'd only discovered it after independence that the person doesn't, a teacher who have taught even our grandparents, that teacher doesn't have the qualification. So it is not possible, it wasn't possible in the entire Owamboland, for instance, for anybody to afford a tractor. So the diamond guys would come and buy a tractor. So you could now cultivate your field from 2 weeks to 2 hours. So you're actually able to see that the entire rural economy, because of that tractor, transformed immediately. You see old pictures of Ford, because they started also buying, these guys as they are coming, but they started buying Ford. So you either sell your diamonds to Port North, to the Portuguese, with this new generation, but the old generation used to go with the diamonds back home. So what they would do, they would take a blanket, on the edges of the blanket, they would just have a needle, get one diamond, they sew it there. So by the time they just pick their blanket and they go home, they will go to some of these guys and they give the diamond, and the men just give a letter, and then you go and get your car from Ford. There is a businessman who, he was the only first black person to be a shareholder in a car dealership. And one of the men tells me that, no, I got a container like this, full of diamonds, and those diamonds were meant for Swapo in exile. What would happen is that they would get the diamonds, they would go to the Portuguese, and the Portuguese would go and sell, and the second Portuguese probably go back to the BS and sell the diamonds again in that whole cycle. So I argue in the book scientifically that there is sufficient evidence. There is no development that you can count, significant development, particularly infrastructure development. Those guys who had, Somangeti farms and all those things, started putting fences on their field. It's all the story of diamond. But they argue, in conclusion, as I sit down, that they were betrayed by Swapo. Because they were collecting diamonds, smuggling diamond, and giving the money back there. But after independence, then because Swapo knew exactly the details. Steve Galloway, he works now for FNB. He was an interlocutory in those. He's a geologist. So in the negotiation between the independent government now after independence and the BS, before NAMDEB was created. He's saying he was very shocked and surprised that the SWAPO guys actually knew how they're smuggling. So they say, let's go in 50-50. We are going to help you to close the diamond smuggling. That's how CDM went to remove the hostels from the actual mines. There's no single hostel now as we speak in the mines, because that's how they used to do all those. They were removed through that whole process because SWAPO went to give the secrets away. They closed it down, and it just changed through those negotiations. Because remember, when we are saying we are 50-50, Namibia is 50-50, the BS is also 50-50 in that transaction. There was a series of negotiations. So what I'm telling you is what a person who was sitting in those negotiations saying, give us this and give us that. I could go on and on, but I think if you buy the book, you will be able to read more and actually have a good understanding. And some of these stories are not alien to many of you. Henry, you were born in Owamboland, I think, or you went through when you was younger. So most of these stories, but his family is a religious family, it wasn't involved. But Henry is aware of those stories. So is many of you. And I know Tileni has been working, even before I started doing my PhD, has been working on this story. Because CDM, in conclusion, to use Tileni's word, is actually the real development bank of Namibia. Thank you very much.